Hey all, Laura here with Unapologetically Me. I have a quick message for you guys today. But first, a little bit of business. So, I have started a podcast with two very good friends of mine called Skeptic Hangout. And that podcast you should go to right now and check it out and like and subscribe. Because that is where I will be tackling all the issues from a skeptical perspective and getting more into the academic weeds of some of these topics that are so fascinating to me. Also, I'm really excited to announce that I have been invited to be a guest host on a couple different shows, and I hope to guest host more in the future as my atheist activism picks up and I really find my voice. So, I will be guest hosting with Ethan Michaels on The Perspective on April 20th. So, mark your calendars for The Perspective next month. But next week, I'm going to be on The Nonprofits along with Rudy B, Puck, and Maltese Falcon, three amazing content creators who I really admire, and I cannot wait to be on nonprofits with them. So I've got a lot going on, and I'm really excited about it. I will leave links in the description below for all the different things I've got going on, so that if you do want to follow me, you know where to find me. Well, I have had a really freaking hard time getting this started, so I am just gonna get started. Hit the record button and see what comes out of it. All right, guys. The topic for today is the marital obligation of women to have sex with their husbands. It's going to be a juicy one. Okay, people, I'm going to make this quick and as pleasant and optimistic as possible because this is a really hard subject for me to get through, and it might be a hard subject for you to listen to. Okay, so here goes. Here's a background story. On Facebook the other day, going through my newsfeed, and I just happened upon a public Facebook page that a friend of mine had commented on and read the post and got pretty instantly fired up. It was about women and how they should act to please their husbands. So I went to their main page, but reading down through some of her posts, I got really triggered. Like PTSD, heart beating, sick to my stomach, triggered. And I spent yesterday in sort of like this triggered state, talking to friends, working through it, kind of figuring out how I felt and bringing myself back down. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm not going to name the person. I'm not going to show the post. I'm going to give a generic overview about what it was about. But if you're curious as to whether or not this kind of religious thinking is out there, do a little digging, see what you find. Because I have a feeling if you don't think it's out there, you're about to be surprised. So here is the message. The message is, women, make yourselves available sexually to your husbands. The consequences of not doing so are that he may not get his needs met and he may stray, or you may tempt him to go into the arms of another woman, or you're just not doing your job as a wife. However you want to justify it, not the best message. The second message was, women, keep yourselves healthy and beautiful and dressed up to please your husband. Again, the end result possibly being maybe he's not attracted to you anymore. Maybe his eyes stray. Maybe his body strays. Again, not really a good message. So this kind of amps me up on two different fronts. First is the women and what our responsibility is and what our obligations are in a marriage. But the second is how incredibly condescending and disingenuous that message is to men. So while I'm here as a woman fighting for women's rights and getting all fired up about a woman's right to do what she wants with her body, I'm also very empathetic to the idea of how men are being treated in this scenario as slobbery pigs who can't keep their hands off other women if you don't keep them sexually satisfied. So I want to get into the argument a little bit. And I want to produce my own sort of counter message to women and to men to encourage them in a more secular, realistic, uplifting kind of way. What I'm not going to go into is details like which Bible verses she pulled, because I think she used them rather incorrectly. But what I do ask you to keep in mind is that whether there's Bible verses to back this up or not, it is a very common religious teaching. So, 1, women, make yourselves sexually available to your husbands. Never, ever, in any circumstance, should we tell any person, male or female, married or unmarried, that they need to subject their bodies and their personal autonomy and their sexuality to another person unwillingly just to make that person happy. That is one of the most vile and disgusting and horrible teachings that you could ever teach a young girl, a teenage girl, or a grown woman. And that should not be the message that we're sending to married couples. Now, I get it. Sex is a big deal. Believe me, I know. So, first, a little perspective. I am not against sex. In fact, I fucking love sex. It's amazing. But sex should be on that individual's terms, never on somebody else's terms. The message I have a problem with is making yourself sexually available is a little problematic. And here's why. If you want to have sex with your spouse, more power to you. Do what you gotta do. Love it. If you are willing to have sex with your spouse, even though you're not really feeling it, again, right on. More power to you. Do what you gotta do. But if you feel in any way obligated that you have to have sex with your spouse in order to keep them happy or to keep them in the relationship or to stop them from straying, here we have a big issue. What if, for example, you're an ace person and you're married to someone with a very high sex drive? There's a dysfunction there in who wants to have sex and when. And to suggest to that person that they have to have sex with them in order to keep their spouse satisfied can cause a lot of mental anguish, physical trauma, emotional trauma, and mental trauma. That can really fuck a person up. But even if you just have slightly different sex drives, to tell a person that you should be making yourself available to another person, whether or not you want to, is a very dysfunctional way to handle a relationship. So, what am I saying? First, I want to be really clear on what I'm not saying. I am not saying that in a relationship where the man might want it more than the woman, that there's no compromises to be made. But those compromises need to be between those two individuals. The woman needs to be perfectly okay with whatever she's agreeing to, and it needs to make her happy and keep her healthy and not traumatize her or cause her any emotional, mental, or physical trauma. But the same works both ways. Sometimes the woman has the stronger sex drive, and it's the man that doesn't want to have sex as often. Yes, I understand that within the confines of a monogamous marriage, that sex may only be between yourself and your spouse, and that may create some dysfunctions in terms of who wants it, when, and how. But the answer should never be, women, make yourselves available to your men. The answer should be, talk through it, compromise, decide what you both need, decide what you're both comfortable with. And if you can't meet the needs of your spouse, maybe that's something that needs to be considered. See, the problem here with the religious message is that on top of an obligation to have sex with your spouse, divorce and openness are both discouraged. You're confined to the monogamous relationship, but you're also being told to sexually satisfy the needs of the man. So rather than going through why it is wrong on the religious side to teach a woman that she needs to submit to her husband or make herself look beautiful for her husband, I'm going to give a more optimistic message. I'm going to take that message of religious servitude and I'm going to turn it on its head. Because otherwise, I might be here for the next hour ranting and raving at you, and I might lose my cool a little bit. Men and women, I'm going to assume you have a healthy sexuality. Whether you are ace and have little or no sex drive, or sex drive only under certain conditions, or whether you're a frequently sexually active person, or whether you have a really high sex drive, whether you're kinky or not kinky, your sex life is your sex life. So, unless you feel it's dysfunctional and you feel like you need to do something about it, maybe seeking therapy or help, I would say run with it. But here's the catch. In a married relationship, yes, there are compromises to be made. Things aren't always exactly perfect or even. But we need to stop being taught these dysfunctional things like, well, if you're in a married relationship, you just have to deal with what you've got and you need to make compromises for the other person's sexuality to keep them happy. Here's a better message. Communicate with your spouse. If one spouse has a different sex drive than another, work together to figure it out. Don't be afraid of things like, maybe this relationship can't work because we're too different. Don't be afraid of what are some options with opening up the relationship and getting our needs met in different ways. Still being there romantically for each other and even sexually, but allowing others to meet the other needs for my spouse that I can't meet. Maybe stop stigmatizing divorce so that if the two of you can't work things out sexually, you can still have a platonic partnership that works for both of you outside of the confines of marriage. What I'm trying to say is your sexuality is in your control. Women, You should never, ever, ever, ever be told that your sexuality belongs to another person or that you have to make yourself available to them. If you want to, go rock his world, whether you feel like it or in the mood or are just doing it because you love him and it's an expression of your love for him. If you're A-okay with it and you're not causing yourself trauma, go rock his world, knock yourself out. But don't ever feel like you have to do it out of obligation or a sense of dread or through hesitation because you're only doing it to make him happy. Especially if it causes you any harm, trauma, frustration, sadness, mental, physical, emotional, it doesn't matter. If it puts you in a bad place, you don't have to do it. And to those of you out there who think that a man will stray if his woman doesn't give him everything he wants the moment he wants it, men, you are not pigs. You can control yourselves, and you know it, and we know it. Yes, there's those few dirtbags out there that need to be handled, and we have things in place socially to handle them. Those women with those guys should be empowered to leave that son of a bitch and go find someone who will respect her body and her mind and her autonomy and herself and her feelings. But in general, you guys are really decent dudes. And if you get turned down once or twice because she's not in a mood, that's cool. And if you are a decent dude, but you're in a relationship that's just dysfunctional where your sexualities just don't match and you're literally not getting your needs met and you need more, then yes, there might need to be some communication in order to maintain that healthy relationship. And yes, that relationship may need to come to an end if it's not going to work out, no matter how either one of you are willing to compromise. And yes, that relationship might benefit from a change in boundaries or a change in the terms of the agreement. Monogamy is not the only healthy marriage model. If you are in one of those situations where your sexualities don't match and you are determined to remain monogamous, there are ways to work things out. The two of you just need to communicate. But when one person is told that she needs to provide to the other person against her will, that's really dysfunctional. And when she's told that it's a service that she should be pleased to offer and happy, that brings a lot of guilt and shame. And so, ladies, my message to you is to let go of that guilt and shame. And men, my message to you is to let go of that guilt and shame too. You're a sexual creature. And maybe your sexuality is different from your wives. But honestly, it's not something that either one of you need to be ashamed of. And it's not something that needs to create a dysfunction in your relationship where one is giving to the other unwillingly. Now, why do I keep saying unwillingly? Well, simple. Because that message is out there for the unwilling people. There wouldn't be a message like, women, submit to your husbands, or women, be sexually available to your husbands, or women, dress up nice to make your husbands happy, if that was naturally what the woman wanted to do anyway. The woman who wants to provide sexually to her husband doesn't need that message. The woman that likes to give to him, even though she's not in the mood, doesn't need that message. The only person who needs that message is that woman who doesn't want to give to her husband, but needs to be made to feel obligated to do so. So I say, take that message, rip it up, and be okay with respecting yourself and still respecting your spouse. And if you can't compromise, whatever you work out in terms of your marriage, staying married, getting divorced, changing the terms of it, at least don't feel like you need to subject yourself to mental and emotional trauma and maybe even physical trauma to make your husband happy. The whole idea of fear that if you don't give him everything he needs, he's going to go run off to the next woman just isn't necessarily true. So don't be afraid to talk to him about it. Bring it up. Ask him what he needs and why. Not every relationship is going to be magically solved just by communication. Sometimes there are problems that run way deeper than just let's communicate and compromise. And I feel for those marriages. But I still maintain that the answer is not subjecting either one of you, male or female, husband or wife, or just spouse, to giving to the other person something that you're not willing to give. And when that thing you give is your body, that makes it even worse. So, the reason I wanted to keep this so quick and I wanted to make it uplifting rather than a huge angry rant is because I do have a lot of trauma there. So I just want to take a quick second to tell you about it. I'm not going to get too deep into it or into many details, but I want you to know that this comes from a place of sincerity and experience. So I was freshly a Christian when I married my husband. I didn't even really know what being a Christian meant at that time. But I knew I wanted to be one, and I knew that I wanted to do the right thing. After I had our kids, I went through this huge hormone crash where I just didn't feel like it. But he didn't. He still had that same high sex drive that we both had prior to me giving birth. When I was a Christian, I heard that message. I internalized that message. I was taught that a woman should give sexually to a man, even if she's not feeling like it, because in the long run, it makes the relationship healthier. It's a small price to pay for a healthy marriage. Let me just tell you, it's not a small price to pay. It is a huge price to pay, and it creates a lot of problems. And it impacted the way that I approached my husband and created a lot of trauma in me that he didn't even ask for. So when he wanted it, I didn't have that conversation with him about compromise. I might have told him, I don't really feel like it, give me a few minutes. Or, I don't really want to tonight, but okay, let's do it. And I always tried to appear enthusiastic because there's nothing a man wants less than a woman who's not enthusiastic, right? And I don't want to make him feel bad for forcing it on me, right? So I allowed myself to be traumatized without him even knowing it. I'm not going to include any of that. If you think as an atheist, I'm just talking out my ass and just making shit up, trust me, I was there. I was that young Christian woman. I got that exact indoctrination. The indoctrination that you should be able and willing to provide for your husband happily, whatever his sexual needs are, so that he doesn't go and stray to another woman, and so that the relationship stays happy, and so that God is happy, and so that the relationship is pleasing to God. I got the message that if I wasn't able to provide for him, he would leave me. I got the message that if I didn't look good for him or keep his interest, that his eyes would stray. I got the message that it would be my fault. So yes, I internalized a lot of that. I had to deal with a lot of that. I went through those emotions, the shame and the fear that I wasn't being a good wife if I couldn't provide to my husband what he wanted and when he wanted it. Now, mind you, this wasn't even coming from him. This was coming from my church. This was coming from Christian messaging on YouTube, in movies. This was coming from the mainstream. It wasn't unusual. It wasn't controversial. It was just the message of how to be a good wife. And so it caused huge dysfunctions in our relationship until we learned to communicate with each other and discovered that neither one of us actually wanted that. We wanted a healthy sex life. We wanted sex to be on our terms, and we wanted it to be good for both of us. But it took some time for me to find that language to be able to communicate to him why I had difficulty with the topic, why I felt shame. He certainly wasn't putting the shame on me, and he didn't understand where it was coming from. It took some time for him to understand that maybe the programming that he heard that he just dismissed, because after all, he wasn't putting that on me, was still being received by me and still being internalized. And so it took us a while to find the right language to overcome that. So, yes, when I talk about the messaging and the trauma that is associated with it, it's because I went through the trauma myself. And yes, I think that I went through trauma light. I think I went through something far less traumatic than what some women have gone through. And so my heart really reaches out to them. I am in no way comparing myself to them. But I do have an idea that if it was that troubling for me and I felt that much shame for not being able to be the good wife by being sexually available to my husband, I know that there are women out there who have it far worse. And my message is for them. I feel for you, and I don't want you to ever feel like you have to give anything to any person that you don't want to give. And that is the kind of religious messaging that we need to fight against and push against. That messaging needs to be attacked and demolished. And we need to replace it with something better, something that teaches people how to be healthy together, how to have a good, thriving relationship on their own terms, and how to be okay with letting go of a relationship if it's just not working. We need to teach people that having a healthy relationship is more important than sacrificing and manipulating and feeling obligated and feeling shame. So that is all I have. And I hope it hits some people and kind of pisses them off. And I hope it gets some people thinking, because I think this is something that deserves a little more attention than what it's getting. All right, people. I've been incredibly unapologetic today. So, what are your thoughts on sexuality? Where are the lines in a relationship that someone should be able to say, hey, this is what I need, and another person should be able to say, hey, I can't give that to you? What are the boundaries? What compromises do we make for each other? I want to know. So leave your comments in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And please, if you want to do me any favor, share this video, share this message. It is one that addresses a topic that I am passionate about. And I hope to get other people passionate about it too, and talking about what healthy relationships actually look like. Hey all, so as you can probably tell from the video, that was a difficult video for me to make. And I realized while editing that I ended it really abruptly, and I didn't say goodbye. So I'm just popping back in to take some time to say thank you for watching, thank you for your support, and I will catch you next time. Bye.